Hey folks, this is Abel James, and thanks so much for joining us on the Fat Burning Man Show, where we talk about real food and real results. Let's talk about air for a second. When was the last time you checked how safe your air is? I know with all of the wildfires, increases in industrial pollution, increases in population, not just in the U.S., but around the world, most of us, more than half of us, are breathing dirty, polluted air, especially if you're living anywhere close to an urban area or an industrial area. So one of the things that Allison and I have been doing over the past few years, since we can kind of work from wherever, we've tried living in a bunch of different places. And one of the things we've been chasing is clean air, clean water, a healthy, balanced ecosystem. One of the most concerning things, though, about breathing dirty, polluted air is that it not only shaves years off of our lives, but it also decreases cognitive performance. It actually makes us less intelligent when we're basically our bodies have to filter through a lot more junk and they have to work harder. Our livers are basically on overdrive when we're breathing polluted air, when we're eating polluted food or drinking polluted water. It's a very holistic thing. We don't just exist in component parts. And to help us put it all together, someone who's been personally touched, in his own life by dementia and has now made it his mission to spread the word about how you can actually prevent a lot of these horrible things from happening. I'm really excited to say I'm back here today, returning to the show with Mr. Max Lugavere. Max is a filmmaker, health and science journalist, and now a New York Times bestselling author as well. Now, before we get to the interview, here's a review that just came in from Steve. He says, "The wild diet changed my life. I have always been a relatively healthy eater, but hearing more about how the food industry works really changed the way me and my fiance approach what we eat. We now adhere to the wild diet and are loving every meal. We don't just eat to eat now. We turn every dinner into an event with great anticipation that we truly enjoy together. The book didn't only change the way we eat, it strengthened our relationship by spending more quality time together." That's from Steve. Steve, thank you so much for writing in and sharing that. What a gem right there, because the wild diet is not meant to be like this dogmatic diet that you follow at all. It's almost like a a philosophy or a lifestyle. It's certainly a lifestyle, but it's more of a way to approach food again in this crazy, messy, confusing world of dieting and nutrition and fitness and industry and all of that. But really, one of the biggest gifts, I think, about getting into food and becoming a foodie is it comes when you share it with the people who you love. So for myself, like sharing dinner every night with my wife Allison is always one of my favorite parts of the day. And we even shop together for food. We go to farmers markets. We kind of make it something that really means a lot to us. It's a small, primal, visceral thing that we get to enjoy together. But you also get to make mistakes together, learn together, and man, I'm just so glad that you folks are enjoying that yourselves and really enriching your own relationship through food. It's a great excuse to do that. So if you're listening and you haven't tried getting into food as a fun hobby, then carve out some time for it. It's really worth it. And honestly, I think it's one of the biggest, predictors of success over the course of your life. If you can enjoy eating this way and eating clean, living clean, moving your body with somebody else, you're going to have a much better shot of doing it for the rest of your life. And I believe, you don't just sign up for this a little bit. Health is something that is a moving target, and you've always got to keep your eye on it. So kudos to you both. And if you're listening right now and you have a story to share, please just drop me an email at abel@fatburningman.com or leave a comment at fatburningman.com. Sign up for the email list, reply to that. Whatever, get in touch. I'm not the best at social media, but if you come to fatburningman.com or abeljames.com, I will definitely be there for you. In fact, we just, my team installed a new one of those chat functions, and it's actually a real person. It's not just one of those bots or whatever. So those are on our websites now too. So you might not notice because it's just kind of like a little logo down at the bottom right, I believe it is. But click that. If you have any questions, you don't just have to send an email anymore. Now it's becoming more interactive, and we're really happy to say that we're upgrading a lot of things behind the scenes on our own websites and streams and feeds and what have you that you'll be able to enjoy in the months ahead. So be sure to check out the Ultimate Daily Bundle at wildsuperfoods.com, which includes Future Greens, Mega Omegas, the Vitamin D Stack, and Probiotic Spheres. You can save over $128 if you select the subscribe and save. So all you have to do is go to wildsuperfoods.com/save128. Save 128. So wildsuperfoods.com/save128 to get the deal. Another really cool thing when you subscribe and save with Wild Superfoods on that bundle, you'll also get free access to our group coaching program in the Fat Burning Tribe as a thanks for supporting our work. So you also get tons of recipes. It's normally about $27 a month. That's one thing that we're really excited to do is try to make more of our content free and supported by, kind of sponsoring ourselves with products that we use ourselves. So anyway, Wild Superfoods is great. Check it out. But if you're just looking for freebies, go to fatburningman.com, sign up for the email list, and I'll send you a 7-day meal plan and a quick start guide so you can get rolling right away. All right, on to the show with Mr. Max Lugavere. You're about to learn how intermittent fasting affects your brain, how to get smarter over time instead of dumber, the dangers of air pollution, what you can do about it, the difference between a wild banana and a cultivated banana, and tons more. Let's go hang out with Max. All right, folks, returning to the show today, Mr. Max Lugavere is a filmmaker, health and science journalist, now podcaster, and also New York Times best-selling author. Thanks for joining us once again, Max.
Thank you, Abel, so much for having me. What a treat it is to be back with you.
Well, you're doing such good work. As we were just saying, you didn't flame out. You've been at this for a while now. Actually, you never really stopped, right? Ever since you were young, you've kind of been like on the screen trying to do good, and your latest work is very much needed right now. It seems like fewer people than ever know how to eat, how to live, especially when it relates to brain health. And what some people might not realize is it's a very personal journey for you. In fact, before this interview, I was looking at some of your social media and some of the work you've been doing, and I saw you dancing with your mom, and I'm just like getting a little like choked up just thinking about it. But one thing that I know even I don't appreciate enough, although I've seen some dementia in my family and people around me, is what does it actually look like and how does it progress over time? What are the things that we should be concerned with in ourselves and the people around us?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, for anybody, it's a marked change in cognition. They say if you forget where your keys are, that's normal. If you forget what your keys are for, then that's a problem. That's when you should go see your neurologist. But the other thing is that people can have memory problems for a myriad of reasons. Some of them could be medical conditions that are treatable, easily treatable. That's why it's really important to touch base with your physician if you have concerns about the way that your memory is working. Not every memory complaint is going to end up being dementia. Thank God, because dementia is horrible. And this is something that I see every single day in my mom, and it's really something that motivates my work in its entirety. I can't lie and say that I don't completely love what it is that I do for a living, but it's motivated by the fact that a couple of years ago, my mom started to develop the earliest symptoms of dementia. And now at this point, it's pretty advanced, and it's something that, I wouldn't wish upon my worst enemy. And I don't purport to have all of the answers. This is a very rapidly evolving field of science. 90% of what we know about Alzheimer's disease has been discovered only in the past 15 years, wow, even though it was first named in 1906. So, this is something that it's rapidly evolving. And, the next 5 years, 10 years are going to just unearth so many unanswered questions when it comes to Alzheimer's disease. And dementia really is the umbrella category because, my mom doesn't have Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's affects 5 million people in the United States, but it's the most common form of dementia. There are other forms of dementia. There's frontotemporal dementia. There's Lewy body dementia. There's Parkinson's disease dementia. And so nonetheless, this is something that really it's set to explode in the coming years. And I think that we have enough information today at this point. We're at this interesting juncture where we don't have to sit on our hands any longer and wait idly until whatever our genetic fate dictates to us, Yeah.
Yeah. And you had such a great point in your book as well. It says, we don't need more science to tell us that stuff is wrong, right? It's you don't say that exactly, but I mean, the point is, even if you look at what's happened with obesity since the time that we were kids, that's a pretty obvious one to see. Whereas dementia, it's a little more ephemeral, right? But we saw how quickly obesity has spread to more and more adults, more and more children. And as to your point, in the future, looking forward, it seems that dementia is kind of doing the same thing. So why should that be scary, and what should we do about it?
Yeah, the truth is it robs us of the essence of who we are. It's like neuroscientist D.F. Schwab says, we are our brains. And so, we're millennials, right, Abel? We may be at the older end of the millennial spectrum, but we're a generation that's invested more in human capital than any prior generation. So the loss of intelligence that that this implies for the universe, really, to me is staggering and tragic. And, in a very real personal sense, to watch a loved one go through dementia, it's like, I can't even, it's so heartbreaking. And, I'm just trying to cherish every moment that I have with my mom. And, as much as I try to dictate my mom's diet and try to put her on, the diet that I believe to be the most brain protective diet, dementia often begins in the brain decades before the first symptom of memory loss. So it's something that I really decided that if anybody was going to have an impact on this condition, it's going to be actually me by getting this message out to younger people. I believe that there's a fundamental limitation that doctors have when it comes to spreading the message of prevention, and especially when it comes to conditions that most people consider to be old people's conditions, like dementia. Yeah. So that's where I really, I felt so strongly that I actually might have the potential to make somewhat of a dent in this condition by sharing my story and by really doing the homework, doing my due diligence, and spreading the science that I was uncovering in my research.
Yeah, and it's a creepy thing because you can kind of see it start to appear and then get worse in certain people who may or may not realize it around you. And I think if we're honest with ourselves, a lot of us do see that. And sometimes you want to chalk it up to normal aging, right? It's in your 40s, 50s, 60s now. The problem is it seems like that number is creeping down, and what's been normalized shouldn't be so very normal, right?
Yeah, you're totally right. I was in the lab at Brown University of Suzanne de la Monte, who coined the term type 3 diabetes to describe Alzheimer's disease, which is a staggering theory as to why Alzheimer's disease develops. And Suzanne de la Monte showed me some very interesting data. She also has a master's in public health, and she basically accessed government records and sort of looked at them and organized the data in a way that hadn't been previously done. And she found that across all age groups, rates of dementia are actually increasing. So this is not something that can be explained by genes or the fact that we're living longer. It's that people are becoming demented more frequently. And you look at as you alluded to, the rates of obesity, type 2 diabetes in this country, it's just out of control. And I don't understand really why it's taken us so long to connect the dots between Alzheimer's disease, dementia, and other chronic diseases that we're seeing just explode in Western society. So, yeah.
And as all of these things are getting worse, certain people appear to be not getting worse, and it's a fluke, whether we like it or not. But there's a certain sliver of health nuts that seem to be doing okay. Yet if you're not a health nut, it seems like almost everyone is getting swallowed up by the medical industrial complex, by pharmaceuticals, by poor quality food and all this other stuff. How do you get to the other side?
I mean, I think that we work in media, right? You and I think we live in a crazy time where information is coming at people 24/7. And, at the same time, our most trusted voices in terms of health and wellness, our physicians, are undertrained when it comes to nutrition. So it leads to a lot of people basically being confused and ultimately feeling hopeless when it comes to making these choices for themselves. I mean, I get this in my little microcosm on Instagram, for example, where I battle constantly with nutritional misinformation. And all I'm trying to do, like, I take no side, I have no bias. I didn't come at this world with any preconception, but it's just that people are really confused, and media doesn't do a good job at conveying science. So people don't really have anywhere to turn to answers. Yeah. And so I think that leaves people kind of feeling like, well, there are no truths. And so therefore, I just need to accept the fate that comes my way, or eat everything in moderation, which I think is the worst advice ever, or what have you. So it's I mean, and genes also do play a role. I mean, not to belittle, basic biology, but, my dad, knock on wood, he's healthy. He has drank alcohol and smoked cigarettes. He still smoked cigarettes his whole life. Doesn't eat very healthy, but he has always practiced, whether, even before there was a name for it, time restricted feeding, which is very interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah, he always ate like 1 or 2 meals a day, and never ate breakfast, always skipped breakfast, and ate early dinners, and that's it. Very, very limited feeding windows for my dad. And I mean, knock on wood, he's healthy today. But my mom, on the other hand, my mom is somebody who really made a rigorous attempt to adhere to the dietary guidelines. She was always very concerned about heart disease because her father had passed of heart disease. And so she was very tuned in to the messaging that has pervaded this country over the past 50 years about fats and cholesterol and things like that. And so my mom ate breakfast every day, low fat, low cholesterol cereals with skim milk. We always used corn oil in my house. We always had margarine in the fridge. And so, people eating the standard American diet, especially given a certain genetic background, I think are just setting themselves up for disaster.
And that's what you ate growing up too, right?
That's what I ate growing up. Yeah. I mean, I am the picture of privilege in this country, right? I grew up in New York City. I had access to healthy food. Thankfully, I was fortunate. My parents could afford healthy food, but they didn't. My mom was busy. My mom was a working woman with 3 young children, and she had my dad, who was the 4th child, if you count his behaviors. And so, my mom's health information that she received was from magazines and newspapers and media. Mm-hmm. And so, we know that over the past couple of decades, dietary cholesterol was something that was considered unhealthy. Fats, and especially saturated fats, were considered deleterious to health. And so my mom always made an effort when we were shopping to buy, the fat-free, low-sodium alternatives to natural foods.
Yeah.
And so that's what I grew up with. That was my diet. And the irony is that we were trying to be healthy the whole time.
Right. I kind of started reading as a precocious little kid my dad's magazines, and I think I was like 8 when I started worrying about cholesterol, saturated fat, and all these things that I had to take out of my diet, which is just absurd to think about, especially considering that it's wrong. But, that was pretty typical, I think, for our generation, to be eating this food that we thought was healthy, and we're trying so hard to be healthy that it's making us sick. Where, your dad is smoking cigarettes and just, eating once or twice a day, and when everyone thinks that he's the unhealthiest, yet he's doing certain things that are, very in line with how we historically lived, right? Let's talk about that a little more.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, and first of all, I think one thing that's really interesting and worth mentioning, I think the worst casualty of the demonization of fat over the past 50 years hasn't been necessarily that we were all avoiding saturated fat, because I do think that when it comes to saturated fat, there's still a genetic difference in the way certain people process saturated fat and respond to it in terms of their blood lipids. But I think the fact that recommendation was then exploited, and our fears surrounding saturated fat was then exploited by the food industry, really opened the door. It was like the movie The Gate. Remember that scary movie in the 80s, basically, like when they put the corpse of the dog into the hole in the ground, and all of a sudden, any number of ghoulish creatures appeared. That was basically the modern supermarket in the early 90s, right? I mean, fat-free oil, oils that basically wouldn't be absorbed, like olestra, creating like a slip and slide through your digestive tract. I mean, those are the kinds of things we were told to eat instead of healthy, natural, fat-containing foods. And by the way, one of the things that our governmental agencies neglected to tell us when they were busy demonizing saturated fat for 50 years is that every natural fat-containing food has saturated fat in it.
Right.
Every healthy, natural, fat-containing food is a significant source of saturated fat. Breast milk, right? Extra virgin olive oil, which is the hallmark of the Mediterranean dietary pattern, which is just sort of like the darling child of nutritional epidemiologists all around the world, right? Extra virgin olive oil is 15% saturated fat,
right,
which is one of the reasons why it's so chemically stable. So it's just been crazy, and I'm super grateful that technology has allowed the truth to get out there, and for people like us, true passionate health investigators, to unearth science that people really ought to know about and bring it to people in a way that's palatable. No pun intended.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the fasting specifically, because your dad did it. I've been doing it for years. I believe you do as well. How does it show up in your life, and is it similar to your dad, different?
Yeah, the way that I practice it is I don't eat for an hour or 2 or 3 after I wake up, and I don't eat for 2 to 3 hours before bed. And the reason for that is that, our bodies have natural circadian inclinations. And when we wake up first thing in the morning, we have a hormonal milieu that wants to burn fat, right? It's like for 45 minutes after we wake up, cortisol is the highest that it's going to be throughout the day before beginning a slow, gradual decline until the end of the day, really. And that's a fat-burning hormone. I mean, it's about one of the body's chief catabolic hormones, and it's working to liberate stored fuels, amino acids, fatty acids, stored sugar in the liver, for use as fuel. It does that during times of stress, which is one of the reasons why cortisol is an important stress hormone, right? But in the morning, cortisol becomes elevated to basically allow you the vigor to be able to seize the day and go out and forage and hunt food, explore, for new lands and things like that. And so what we tend to do when we eat breakfast in its most commonly consumed form is we thwart cortisol's catabolic activity specifically on our fat tissue, because insulin acts like a one-way valve on our fat cells. This is due to, a number of things. But for one, insulin basically activates a protein in the adipocyte called hormone-sensitive lipase, which basically prevents fatty acids from leaving the fat cell. And so in the morning hormonal milieu, when we consume the bran muffin, the glass of orange juice, the bowl of oatmeal, cortisol is going to continue to exert its catabolic effects, but only on your muscle tissue and the sugar that you have stored in your liver, not your fat. So an hour or 2 after I wake up, then I'll eat. Generally speaking, a huge salad, so a rule that I set for myself, I try to eat a big fatty salad every single day.
Nice.
It's a great way of checking off your, nutritional boxes for a multitude of minerals and vitamins. I was doing a deep dive recently into the change in what's called our ionome, which is basically the sum nutritional content of our produce over the past 50 years. And, our produce is becoming less nutritious over time. Yeah. So
did it say how much?
Some nutrients like riboflavin had about a 40% decline over the past 50 years.
And magnesium is another one that's really dropped off, right?
Magnesium, protein, vitamin C. Basically, why this happens is that, it's a combination of factors, but in part our agricultural methods that put yield as sort of the utmost priority, basically causes, our produce to grow faster than ever before in history, right?
And so dilutes it.
Yeah, exactly. So it dilutes it with starch and sugar, and it makes our produce less nutrient dense. Um, the other thing, actually, that has been, it's sort of, this hasn't been proven, but they have a number of methods of seeing, of sort of coming to this hypothesis that increasing levels of CO2 in the atmosphere also does the same thing. So completely independent of our farming practices, CO2 in the atmosphere. Yeah, because plants use CO2 to generate energy. And so the fact that the CO2 in our atmosphere has either doubled or quadrupled over the past 100 years, it's caused our plants to grow faster as well. And so essentially what this is doing is causing our plants to become less nutritious and contain more starch and sugar. And, and that's a pretty bad thing over time, but produce still tends to be it's a category that still represents some of our most nutrient dense foods. So
but it's
every day
turning it into empty calories somehow.
Yeah.
Progress is turning it into empty calories.
100%. And, this might actually indirectly be contributing to the obesity crisis in America as well, because, when we eat less protein, which we now know our produce is storing less and less protein because it's growing faster, we tend to eat more of everything else. This has been sort of this is the idea behind what's called the protein leverage hypothesis. And so, this may be a new sort of lever by which, people's waistlines are expanding because, our produce is becoming less satiating. It has less protein and less nutrients. It's also one of the reasons why so many of us are malnourished. 90% of Americans are now deficient in at least one essential nutrient. So, but that being said, every day I'm still trying to eat a large daily salad. I'm trying to do my best, right? Given the world that the timeline that I was planted on this earth in the middle of. So, dark leafy greens, kale, spinach, and arugula. That's going to be like my first meal of the day.
Yeah.
And
raw?
Yeah, typically raw. I do lots of cooked vegetables for dinner, but during the day I like to get in a decent amount of raw vegetables, especially cruciferous vegetables.
Yeah.
When you chew raw cruciferous vegetables, you create a compound. Well, you create a number of compounds in your mouth when you're chewing these raw crucifers, but sulforaphane is one of them that I've become kind of interested in as a sort of genetic modulator. It's been shown to boost levels of glutathione in the brain, which is really important. And Rush University. Cool?
If you just feed them good vegetables, your bodies figure it out and they do everything you need to have done.
Well, that's the thing. That's why, I feel like one of the things that I'm trying to do is try to, transmute the awe and wonder that I feel about all this stuff to other people, because I think above and beyond being healthy, I think it's so cool. Each one of us is heir to this incredible legacy honed by millions of years of Darwinian struggle, right? And here we are, without an owner's manual, what are we to do?
And 80% of us are overweight at this point or ill in some way.
I know, and that's the big tragedy.
Where I think the point I'm trying to make is that we're meant to be healthy, that our bodies are incredible, right? We're both making that point. And
we're all meant to look like you, Abel.
Oh, come on. But the thing is, our bodies are meant, whether we're scrambling up rocks, behind my house, we live in the Rockies now. And if you let yourself go, if you let yourself be that squirrel on the telephone wire, then you can move so much better than your brain could make you move, if that makes sense. When you eat something, it's not I'm eating vitamin D and vitamin A or whatever. It's you eat a vegetable that's hardy, because you look at it, you touch it, you feel it. It's also hardy. It was raised in a natural environment, and your body does just fine. It's before 100 or so years ago, no one ever had to worry about any of this stuff. It was all about where's our next meal going to come from, whether we're talking about hunter-gatherer days or even early agriculture. The problem is, to your point, the nutrient density has been kicked out of almost every category of our foods, even the nutrient dense ones, right? But once agriculture came, and now we're eating 3 crops that are 80% of our diet. I don't know, 60 to 80, depending on who you're looking at and who you're talking about, whatever. And it's the lowest quality, least nutrient dense food that humans arguably have ever been eating. that's a problem, right? Like to come over to the health nut side actually isn't that hard from a dogmatic tactical standpoint, right?
Yeah, exactly. You're 100% right. I mean, it's just like we really are living in a time that makes it incredibly difficult to reach our optimal selves. And that's why I have empathy for people who are struggling to, to be well.
Right.
And, this is something that I like, I didn't come at this from an interest in fitness and like trying to attain a six pack and like look like an Adonis, right? I came at this because I see true sickness every single day, and I've seen what the medical establishment can offer a person with this degree of illness, and it's bleak, man. It is bleak in some of the like most storied cathedrals to Western medicine that I've had the privilege of being able to go to. It's diagnose and adios in every instance. So even though it's hard, I think it's worth it. And even though it's expensive at times, especially if, you don't kind of think about it and plan and, it's not as expensive as disease.
Right.
And I'll tell you that, like, I mean, disease, nothing is expensive like chronic disease. So it's expensive for the individual. It's expensive for the nation. I mean, no matter what side of the political spectrum you fall on, this is like something that's bankrupting the nation.
Literally.
Literally. So, it's just something that I really think that we should all try. We can all afford to try a little bit harder. We're going to feel better. We're going to be more, fully expressed. We're going to be able to love, one another more deeply. And so, yeah, it's just something that I really strongly believe in.
One thing that I've been thinking about recently, especially when you look at like our books, for example, like once the publisher goes through them and all this stuff, it comes out and it's like Genius Foods and like the Wild Diet, and it looks like it's offense, right? But we're playing defense, and we're trying to give other people defense as well. And it can be hard to see that from the outside in, but I think that's really what you have to do today. It's not like I'm going to chase that six pack or I'm going to be a marathon runner or triathlete. It's more like I need to practice responsibility and self-reliance and put my shields up and play some defense here. Because if we just follow the options that are given to us by whether it's the medical community, the food marketing community, or just eating at a cafeteria, if you just go the way that everyone else is going, it's pretty grim. That should be obvious to everyone. But self-defense is really what we all need to do. And that also hopefully will help people frame the idea. It's not like chasing some other silver bullet. It's not like we need a ton more research to tell us that it's good to eat nutrients-dense, dark leafy greens, right? Like we know enough about that to all be eating our fatty salads, which is what I do pretty much every day as well, by the way. Like we can all be doing that right now with exactly what we have, right?
100%. Yeah. I mean, I think so frequently we place the burden of proof onto, foods that have been in the human food supply for a really long time, and it's like the new foods, the new inventions and creations by the food industry, we sort of, we give a hall pass to, like a free get out of jail card. Whereas I believe that modern food products should be guilty until proven innocent.
I was just going to say that. Yeah,
they're put on the market, and it leaves scientists having to play catch up to really try to find the money and to try to find the resources to prove that these modern, foods and inventions and chemicals are not safe for human consumption.
And where do you find the money for that research, right? Like who's going to pay for that? Whose advantage is that towards? Regular people, the population doesn't have money like that to sponsor studies like that. And the government usually doesn't.
Right. Yeah. The NIH, funding for nutrition research is very limited. And so it's like, why should the burden of proof be placed on, grass-fed red meat, for example, or, studying wild berries or, dark leafy greens. I'm not saying that we don't need to research, right?
Right.
But it's like we'll consume all the corn oil and canola oil that we can with abandon, right? Not thinking for a second that these foods didn't exist in the food supply up until 70 years ago.
Right.
So it's just problematic. And there are numerous case studies where things have been on our supermarket shelves only later to be discovered as being very harmful. I mean, trans fats are like...
Olestro was one of them, right? It gave people anal leakage.
Anal leakage, yeah. I mean, the worst. And I remember buying chips with Olestro because I was like, I don't want to, I mean, if I could eat healthy Doritos, right, that aren't going to make me fat.
Of course, we're Americans.
Yeah, totally. We want to have our cake and eat it too. That's probably where that saying comes from.
I'm sure.
So, yeah, I mean, trans fats, the worst, dietary emulsifiers now, I think the research on them. I was just reading about purified fiber extracts. I eat protein bars today, low carb protein bars when I'm traveling and I'm on the road that are sweetened using fiber extracts like, chicory root extract or tapioca soluble fiber extract as like the second or third ingredient. And these are new, lab made creations that I have assumed are going to be inert, if not healthy in my body because they may have some kind of prebiotic effect.
Yeah.
Well, I was just reviewing a study that came out recently where it showed that in mice, not a perfect study, the mice were at, an increased genetic risk for liver cancer. But compared to their normal standard diets, when these mice were supplemented with these, I believe it was chicory root extract, they had like a significantly increased risk of aggressive liver cancer.
Really?
And gut yeah.
Wow.
So I'm not saying that translates to humans, but I do know that if I eat one too many of these protein bars made with chicory root, it blows up my stomach. Yeah. Like something is not good down there when I eat too many of these protein bars. We know that humans have a tolerance of about 10 grams of chicory root fiber. So, I don't know what future science is going to say about these extracts, but the point is that I think we all need to be a little bit more skeptical about new foods, modern culinary creations.
Well, isn't that interesting? Because it's and it's tempting. It's like, there's this new superfood, right? And it's supposed to do all these things. But even if you look at MCT, I remember when that first started like taking off a few years ago. And now like everyone is into MCT oil. But if you ask most people who consume it, what's the difference between MCT oil and coconut oil? I would venture to guess that most people couldn't answer that question. And when a lot of the people who were in a multi-level marketing keto thing kept trying to get me to sell their crap, and there were a lot of those, they asked me what I thought about some of the powders and some of the MCTs and some of the other stuff that they had sent my way. And almost all of them upset my stomach. And they're just like, oh, I thought you were hard. You were just a softie. And I'm just like, no, your product sucks. And I don't think it's good for people. That's the difference. Maybe I am a softie, but I'd rather be more sensitive and know a little bit about whether something I'm consuming is good for me or not. And like, not that MCT is bad. I'm just saying that like having more and more and more and more and more of it is not good. And also, what's the matter with coconut oil, which is already arguably a somewhat processed product that came from originally a fatty coconut, which, lest we forget, is almost all saturated fat. And that's why it's supposedly good for us, right?
Yeah, and I mean, there are entire populations that use tons and tons of coconut oil, but they have different genes than us, right? Mm-hmm. From my genes, I'm of Northern European descent, right? So did we have coconuts growing up there? No,
or bananas or all these tropical fruits, but you had milk. Maybe you might have had dairy, whereas people down in the tropics might not have.
There you go. Great point. Yeah. So it's like, now we live in this world where everything is, we have always on access 24 hours a day, 365 days a year from all different parts of the world. I mean, you go to your modern supermarket. I live in New York City. I've got strawberries grown in Mexico, medjool dates from Morocco, a pineapple grown in, who knows where, coconuts from, so it's just like, and now we've got, people with different genetic backgrounds, different fitness levels, all sort of thrust into the same modern food environment. And it's just, I mean, there's no question that there's a relationship there between the level of disease that we're seeing and, the modern food supply.
And also talking about modern food supply, if you're eating at a restaurant, then good luck avoiding guar gum, carrageenan, prebiotic fibers, sulfates, like aluminum. All sorts of stuff is inside of our food, especially if we don't know what's inside of our food. And I think we have these gigantic blinders on, because if you are eating from a cafeteria, or if you're at a hotel, if you're traveling, or if you're just eating at a friend or family's house, like oftentimes those foods don't come with a giant label explaining everything that's in there. Most of us are consuming some of these things, and we don't really know what they're doing to us because, like we were talking about before, who is going to sponsor the study that says that all of these food additives that are assumed to be safe because they're in all these organic products now, who's going to say that they're actually not safe for us? And then once that does happen, like BPA is a perfect example. Is like, oh, BPA is bad. It's doing all this bad stuff to us. We got to get it out of everything. And now everything's BPA free. But what did they put in instead? And is that good for us? Right?
Yeah.
And also, what's the matter with glass and stainless steel, which we've been using for at least hundreds of years?
Yeah, totally. I mean, just going back to like food, we've been using extra virgin olive oil for 8,000 years.
Right.
There's evidence that human beings have been crushing olives for 8,000 years. So, that tells you something, right? We didn't have the chemistry labs required to extract oil from corn and soybeans up until 80 years ago, 100 years ago. And so, it's just, I think by focusing on food quality, I think that really makes everything a lot easier, because we don't want to be walking around obsessed, right? We still want to be able to go and have dinners with our friends in restaurants and things like that. But by focusing on food quality, I really think, and whole foods specifically, shopping around the perimeter of the supermarket, I think that just kind of it allows you to offload some of that anxiety.
Yeah.
By just, the age-old wisdom to consume less packaged processed foods, that I know that you promote in your work. At the end of the day, we can get into the nitty-gritty of why these foods are so damaging to us and why they're so unhealthy. But, you basically avert any risk of, any of these, foreign toxic substances entering your body by sticking to whole foods.
Yeah.
And it becomes even more critical today because of what we talked about earlier, the fact that our whole foods are becoming less nutritious just by virtue of the environment. And so I think that's why, at the end of the day, you really have to be, it's the answer is really that. It's the wild diet, it's genius foods. It's sticking to those whole foods because it's the best shot that you've got today to be well nourished and to be able to equip your body with the tools that it needs to fight off against the many insults thrown at it by the modern world.
Right on. So that's the food piece. But I do want to make sure that we talk as well about what's happening to our brains in terms of attention, focus, especially in the days of notifications, social media, email, technology on us all the time, especially for generations like I feel that our generation, millennials, were some degree raised on it. Maybe not digital natives like the folks who are younger than us, but at least we have some defense against it, maybe some understanding, whereas our parents' generation is really getting into technology, getting addicted to Apple Watches and all these notifications and sleep tracking and all this stuff. But what is it doing to our brains over time, as you understand?
Well, I think technology, it's a perfect example of a double-edged sword in that it's incredible to be able to connect with people. Loneliness is a toxin. It has an epigenetic effect. It's able to regulate gene expression. And, I think obviously we should all try to be more connected in our social environment. But for some people for whom loneliness is not a choice, I think social media allows an incredible way of reaching out and connecting with like minds. If you live in a small town and you feel ostracized for whatever reason, social media is amazing to be able to allow people to connect and feel like they're part of a larger fabric of society. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, I think it's also damaging because, first of all, it short circuits our brain's reward centers. We're always looking for that next like or that next comment or the new follower.
And importantly, it's designed to. I just want to add
it's designed to. Yeah, it is designed to. I mean, it's like these apps are literally created by people that are working in isolation. And their paycheck depends on them increasing engagement of their products. So they're all designed to, increase addiction, increase engagement and things like that. And I think that's problematic. I think we're spending, far too much time with our faces plugged into our iPhones.
Yeah. Better than our brains, though.
Yeah, better than our brains. That's for sure. I mean, I don't know if you believe in like the singularity and what, they're projecting, but yeah, I mean, who knows what's coming down the pike?
Well, I was just listening to Elon Musk the other day, and I do not think that man is a hero by any means. But he was saying, basically, it looks like we'll have no other option than to get brain implants, because otherwise you won't be able to get a job to keep up with all the other people who are getting brain implants to work better at their jobs and be smarter than you. And it's like, I'm not sure that's the best way to be thinking about all of this right now.
Yeah. Well, my perspective on that, because I dabbled a little bit in like the futurism community a couple of years ago. And, I think that we need to parse out artificial intelligence from human intelligence. And, when you look at like an ant walking around on the ground, that ant that's an intelligent creature, right? And especially when you zoom out and you look at the colony of ants, I mean, there is a profound intelligence there, right? So we can design software and machines that display a certain level of intelligence, that's for sure. But whether or not a computer is ever going to be able to emulate human intelligence, I don't really believe that's possible. But I remain to be
it could augment human intelligence, but that means that it could also be a double-edged sword, doesn't it?
Well, it's already augmenting human intelligence. I mean, my intelligence is like, I'm, because of technology, this is my, outsourced hive mind. Like this is my smartphone is an extension of me. When I'm curious about something, I literally a few movements of my fingers and I basically get plugged into, all the world's knowledge within seconds.
Or what it appears to be.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I think that's important because people do say, now I have all the knowledge in the universe in my hands. It's like, maybe, but you also have all the bull in the world in your hands.
Yeah, that's true. That's true as well. And so it's going to be, a challenge, I think, as you mentioned, when these computers become, when the friction between our interface with them becomes less and less. Like right now, we require thumb, mechanical movements of our thumbs to interface with our technology. Eventually, I mean, we're going to have new ways of interfacing with it. I don't even know what that's going to look like, but
it's not Google Glass.
Yeah, it's definitely not going to be Google Glass. That was so nerdy, that thing. But yeah, I mean, I think, I have my own, technology addictions that I struggle with. I'd like to spend less time on my smartphone. But at the end of the day, like I'm very grateful for, for what it's allowed me to do. I mean, I am able to do what I do for a living, and affect people based solely on technology. I mean, I've obviously done the homework, which technology certainly enabled. But writing my book and being able to create a platform for myself that allowed that book to actually get into the hands of other human beings, I mean, it's all thanks to technology.
Yeah.
So
you can definitely use it as a tool. I think that's the message I would like to pass on that's really helped me, is especially having taken more than a year off several times from the internet and tech for the most part. Not ever 100%, but for the most part. It's man, we live in the age of Star Trek. The things that we can do with technology is absolutely insane. The problem is, if you just follow the path that technology takes you on, then it's a rabbit hole you don't want to go down, right? People are setting these paths that are meant to make you, whether it's, they call it engagement, right? The Silicon Valley folks, we call it addiction on our side. So hopefully, obviously, I am not anti-technology 100%. This, in the same way, like there's no way we'd be able to do any of this without technology, but we don't want to be slaves to technology. And I think when our brains are concerned and our consciousness is concerned, our minds, all of this, even our memories and our dreams, these things can be augmented negatively by technology, and they are right now without us realizing it. And for the sake of brain health, I think in a similar way, we need to practice self-defense with our consciousness and technology in a similar way that we do when we're eating our vegetables and not eating all the new garbage that they're trying to shove down our throats.
Yeah, Abel, that's a perfect analogy. Like, we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? Technology is here to stay. The genie's not going back in the bottle, right? It's incredibly powerful. It's an amazing tool. We've revolutionized governments all thanks to technology, right? Like, we're more informed than we've ever been all thanks to technology. It's the same parallel can be drawn with food, right? We're not going to like stop eating food because we have a food supply that's become saturated with hyper palatable food-like products, right? No, we just avoid to the best of our abilities the hyperpalatable food-like products and stick to the real food. The same thing for technology. Like social media, we know that that's addictive. We know that social media provides to our brain the same level of like dopamine response as hyperpalatable foods, right? So, I mean, I think the onus is really on us to recognize that, to become aware of that, and then to use our devices accordingly with that level of consciousness about it. That doesn't mean that we're going to stop, Googling topics the minute we become curious about something, because that's, I think, where technology really is amazing. But it's about sort of thinking about, taking I think the term hyperpalatability and extending it beyond food to,
clickbait memes.
Yeah, clickbait memes. Like that headline was hyper palatable. I had to click on it. Just recognizing that and taking a little bit of like a pause, if it's just like a beat or two, and kind of recognizing that impulse that we have, and then kind of like acting more, I guess, consciously about it. I think we'd all be a little bit better off.
What a great point. Well, we're just about out of time, Max, but before we go, please tell folks where they can find your book and what you're working on next.
Yeah, so my book, Genius Foods, is available everywhere books are sold. Again, it's called Genius Foods. I highly recommend picking it up. I'm biased, of course, but it's helped a lot of people. It's a nutrition masterclass. It's a care manual for the modern human brain. And then my podcast, The Genius Life, which is available wherever you listen to podcasts. And that's
Righteous.
it. And I'm on social media, Instagram, Twitter, you name it.
Yeah, well, you've been on the show twice, Max. We're going to have to go for the hat trick pretty soon.
Yeah, man. Well, it's always a pleasure hanging with you. You're a light in this industry, and there are not many. Like it's when you meet good people putting out high quality information out into the universe, you want to keep those people close. So
Likewise.
Thank you for doing what you do, Abel.
Thank you. Thanks so much for coming on the show, man.
My pleasure.
Hey there, listener. Thanks so much for listening to the very end of this episode. As a special bonus, I'm including a new original song that I made up just for you, live on the spot, as part of my new improv music video series. I hope you like it. You can check out hundreds of these original songs and more for free at abeljames.com. Here we go.
Everything is perfect. Everything is perfect. Everything is perfect. Everything is perfect in the Genius Bar. 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 Everything is perfect in the Genius genius farm. Everything is perfect. Genius farm. Everything is perfect. Genius farm. Everything is perfect. In the genius farm. In the genius farm. Everything is perfect. In the genius farm. Everything in the genius farm. Everything is perfect. 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 In the genius farm. Genius. Genius. Everything is. Everyone's a genius. At the genius farm. In the genius farm. Everything is perfect. At the genius farm.
This episode is brought to you by listeners like you and Future Greens. You want my number one health tip right now? Get your greens in every single day. I've been getting my greens on every day for coming up on, well, almost every day, let's be honest, for coming up on almost 10 years now, and I believe it makes a monumental difference to my health, performance, and overall well-being. Why? Well, most of us eat too many acidic foods like meat, dairy, or sugar and other junk carbs, leading to an unbalanced pH level in the body and more than our fair share of toxins. I don't know if you've ever tried greens supplements, but most of them taste terrible, like fish tank. And if it doesn't taste good, I won't drink it, no matter how good it is for me, especially if you're talking every day. There are tons of supplements out there packed with cheap fats, sugar, fillers, and caffeine, but we have a much better option if you're looking to increase your energy and your health. So when Allison and I are on the road, we always take Future Greens. Future Greens is a concentrated superfood powder made from 15 organic fruits and vegetables, plus 6 additional superfoods, as well as digestive enzymes. So in less than 60 seconds, you can get the nutrition of over 20 fruits, veggies, and adaptogens, all with less than 1 gram of sugar. Future Greens is packed with vitamins, minerals, and filling prebiotic fiber from whole, organic veggies, sprouts, algae, and berries, including kale, beet, parsley, collard greens, cauliflower sprouts, broccoli sprouts, spirulina, chlorella, blueberries, raspberries, and much more. Imagine the time and expense it would take you to buy and prepare all those foods separately. Trust us, we've tried, and Future Greens makes it a heck of a lot easier. Our ingredients are harvested at peak freshness and potency and immediately concentrated and dried using cool temperature processes that preserve the energetic and nutritional integrity of all the ingredients. Whether you're looking to strengthen your immunity, cleanse your system of toxins, alkalize your body, diversify your diet, or boost your energy without caffeine, Future Greens is your new best friend. And as a listener of Fat Burning Man, you can get a 20% discount to try Future Greens yourself. So to get Future Greens from Wild Superfoods and your special Fat Burning Man deal, just visit fatburningman.com/greens to get 20% off when you subscribe and save. On top of that, you'll get an extra bonus that I can't even tell you about right now, but just visit fatburningman.com/greens. We'll see you there. Well, hey there, listener. This is Abel one more time, and I just want to say thank you for listening to this episode of the Fat Burning Man Show. If you liked it, don't forget to hit that subscribe button wherever you might be listening to or watching this show right now. And if you have a second, please leave me a quick review for the Fat Burning Man Show. I read every single one of them, and every time you leave a review, it gives us a little boost in the rankings, and that helps other people find this show. And if you can think of someone else who might enjoy and benefit from this free show, please take a second to share it with a friend or a family member. And if they're like, what is this fat burning man thing? That's a really silly name. You could be like, you're right, but here's the deal. We've recorded over 250 episodes of the Fat Burning Man Show with thought leaders in health from all over the world. And so far, we've won 4 awards, hitting #1 in health in more than 8 countries internationally. We have more than 30 million downloads already, but we're just getting started. I can't believe any of this, by the way, and couldn't do any of this without you. So thanks once again. But here's some more good news. You can download and listen to every single episode of the Fat Burning Man Show for free with 0 outside advertisements, no outside sponsors, and no corporate overlords. All you have to do is type in fatburningman.com. We'll give you a second here just to type it in, fatburningman.com. And you'll get all the show notes, transcripts, and video and audio versions for all the past episodes of the Fat Burning Man Show for free. Better yet, enter your email at fatburningman.com, sign up for my newsletter, and I'll even send you a quick start guide so you can take your health into your own hands right now, along with a few of our ridiculously tasty recipes as a special thanks for signing up. Once again, just go to fatburningman.com right now, enter your best email to get your free goodies with a bonus surprise straight to your inbox. This is Abel James signing off. Thank you so much for listening once again, and have a great week.